Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Plains, where today, surprisingly, we greet you with new baby bison. I say surprisingly because it took a lot longer with the Highland cows, but hey, maybe the bison are just a bit more active in that respect. It's a bit of a shorter one today as we add in our newest guests, the Pronghorn antelope. That is correct, we will be blasting through today's setup as the large majority of the work was completed last week. So if you want to just watch the pronghorn bit here at the start, I don't blame you, but I've also added in some extra little bits of scenery to the end, as I needed to go in somewhere and I didn't want to extend an already 30-minute video just for them. Before we get into the naming, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see more like this, you can of course always subscribe. And get yourself into the comments to leave your suggestions for today's animals, the pronghorns. Now, to the bison names. We do tend to get more names for males than females, which is not surprising, especially when the male is, well, enormous and drawing most of the attention. That being said, it means some of the more gender-neutral suggestions will end up on the females. We'll start with our big boy, and not necessarily a gendered name, but it wouldn't really work on anyone else. Say hello to the mighty Goliath. Submitted by Zeko Mapping along with our first female, Onyx. Next we have another suggestion from Lisa. A very fitting, very American name. Frontier. And finally, oh god, the one I've been struggling with the most for the pronunciation. Feel free to correct me in the comments. Our final name. Ah! Thank you, Sean, for that one. Today, we have a family of pronghorns being introduced to the same enclosure, although with greater access to the extended habitat. But they too will be in need of some good names, so head to the comments to leave your suggestions, or to make me say more insane things for your entertainment. Now, as I've been talking, you will have noticed that to start with, I'm decorating the upper staff area of the barn with some hay stores for animal bedding, tools and equipment for cleaning, tables to work at with some veggies to be prepared for feeding, and a random wheel, because that's where you store random crap, the back of an old barn. This is another habitat that is a bit out of the way, not the most accessible for the keepers to bring food or supplies for the odd maintenance job, or general cleaning. So it makes sense to have some things on hand in the vicinity to make life a bit simpler in an emergency. I have noticed in the last couple of episodes that I have forgotten to explain how we came to acquire our animals. I think probably because the first few species were mostly pests that had been rescued from the axe. It didn't really necessitate much explanation. But for today, I think it makes sense to revive that, as if you've got a bison under your porch, you've got bigger problems than pest control can handle, to be honest. The bison, incidentally, were purchased from a ranch in Montana as part of a conservation program to lift animals out of the meat pipeline and boost breeding populations. We'll do our bit by maintaining a steady group here and releasing offspring when we can to add to the gene pools of herds across the US. The pronghorn, however, were taken from Wyoming and Colorado, where hunting is popular. Now, hunting, or culling, is necessary in some places and with some species, as populations can get out of control without enough natural predators. Pronghorns have plenty of predators, but they're also bloody fast, and I can see how they might still survive to reproduce like rabbits. Regardless, hunting isn't everyone's preferred choice for control, and as we've got experience in this area with the deer in the Highlands, it makes a lot of sense for us to act as an alternative, and we can continue to do so in the future by taking more each season. It does help as well that I overestimated the size of the bison habitat. I think I mentioned last week that the bison had over 7,000 square meters to use. Well, the antelope have closer to 10,000 thanks to those fat barriers. Coming to the outdoor section, depending on where this lines up, you will see that I've made some wall-mounted feeders, in a similar way to how I made those custom feeders in the moose habitat in Trondheim. Only this one isn't functional. It maybe could work, but I think I made it too close to the knoll barriers for the hanging feeder to be placed into the wall. Now, I thought that the foliage allowance would only register in the traversable area for the animals. However, I'm going to fill up the small area off to the side of the barn, mostly with grass, but it all contributes to the coverage. The pronghorns have no limit to their foliage allowance, but the bison are a little bit stricter, as I think I mentioned last week. So I figured, as long as the bison don't see this area as accessible, it shouldn't matter. Wrong. It looks like it all adds up within the barriers, which is a little disappointing, but thankfully I had a little bit of buffer still, so I didn't go over the bison limit. Something worth remembering though in the future. This area looks a lot busier than the rest of the habitat, which right now is a bit out of place, but once I extend the foliage all the way up to the coyote habitat, that should have more of a consistent feel. I just need to decide if there's anything else that I want to do in that area first. I know guests are complaining about a lack of toilets, so that might be a good place for a little rest stop. We looked at these fat barriers last week and I said that I wasn't sure whether the animals would use them as intended. Now, I have completed the habitat, obviously, and the animals are all in, and I can confirm that the pronghorn do use the areas that are designated for them in both the barn for sleeping and out in the pasture. In fact, that was where they went first as soon as they were introduced. And the baby bison have no interest in venturing too far from the safety of the herd, so they haven't been beyond the barrier besides when I put them over there to make sure that they could leave. Fantastic! An idea that actually worked. Before we get to the cinematics, at least hopefully, I have been misjudging how long these voiceovers go recently. Before we get there anyway, we should have time for a little bit of history. Once upon a time, the land that came to be known as America was home to a species of big cat known colloquially as the American cheetah. Now, we can't know for certain that these cats had the same top speeds as the African cheetah that we see today, but based on the similarities in skeletal structure, it's likely to have been a contender. The pronghorn, or an earlier iteration of the species, would have been one of the most frequented takeout options for these speedsters, driving the evolution of the species to some significant top speeds itself. Those cheetahs went extinct some 10,000 years ago, but the antelope kept their speed. Now, the second fastest land mammal behind the African cheetah, pronghorns can run around 60 miles an hour. What they're running from nowadays I couldn't say, but there's not much that could catch it in a straight foot race. The final view of today's enclosure is not far off the original plan. The habitat is somewhat larger than anticipated, particularly to the southernmost edge as it navigates the hills, but it is faithful to the initial design where it matters. Your eyes may have been drawn to something blue on the overhead that has appeared, which is our first addition to today's video, apart from the animals, obviously. The veterinary centre has always looked a little bit small to me. Might be fine for the raccoons and skunks, but now we have bison, and bison are not getting through that doorway. Bear in mind that none of this, bar the vet building itself, is usable. The inside is empty. It is just an aesthetic addition to be a bit more believable. So there's an argument that this was kind of unnecessary, but you know, we're just going to roll with it. The main body of the building will be built onto the side of the raw vet centre, creating a small courtyard for vehicles or transport containers, maybe, to be brought in and manoeuvred easily in that space. We will have an animal gate on the front of the building so that bison can be moved inside without needing to remove a window or something, and a higher roof for better clearance for larger species. I will lower the roof later so that it doesn't draw too much attention from the entrance building, which does help it not stand out too much as you enter. The main body of the building, I imagine, will be separated into an examination or operating area. Something like what we did in the coyote habitat, but maybe a bit bigger, with a bigger bench for bigger animals, heavier animals. And also some holding pens for observation, before animals are reintroduced back into their habitats to make sure they're okay, make sure they haven't ripped out stitches or well enough to go back. These pens will also have an outdoor space so they don't feel too claustrophobic and the animals can get some air while they recover. Other than that, it's all pretty much just set decorating. I've also added in some scenery to some of the in-between areas a bit later on, just to cover up the water and power that was needed for the bison and pronghorn habitat, but there's nothing too spectacular. Not a lot to talk about at least, so with that, don't forget to leave your name suggestions for today's pronghorn. I feel like the door has been opened for all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas to make me make some very peculiar noises now. So have at it, as long as it's not offensive, I will give it my best. Thank you all for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, have a great week, and I will see you again in the next one.
Bye.